Today, or my daily take over at HartmannReport.com, is titled, "Why Do You Think I'm a Threat to America?" And you may remember last week this very, after some Republican ass called and got in a screaming match with me, a very reasonable sounding fellow from the GOP called in and said words to the effect of, I voted twice for Donald Trump and I'd vote for him again. Why do you think that I'm a threat to America? And we kind of wandered off into a discussion about tax policy. But, I'm a sucker for reasonable people. But let me just go through the list now because, it's been a while. And, I think that absolutely it's true if you're voting for Republicans, you are a threat to this country, to America, to the ideals of this country, to this country remaining a democracy. So let's just go through the list. Trump and the Republican Party are endorsing Tucker Carlson's great replacement theory that argues in most of its various iterations that wealthy international Jews, they use George Soros as the cutout for that, are collaborating with black and Hispanic people to replace white people at all levels of society. This has led to an explosion of anti-Semitic, anti-black, anti-Hispanic violence and the murder of a whole bunch of people, both black, Hispanic, Asian, and Jewish, in venues ranging from synagogues to supermarkets to churches. As America becomes more multiracial, bigots and political opportunists like Trump see this as an opportunity rather than a threat, and they're using this strategy. They've used this strategy throughout history to seize political power, number one. Number two, lying has become the core of their political strategy. You'll recall Franklin Roosevelt talked about this back in 1940. In fact, here is Franklin Roosevelt and what he had to say.
Remember, a number of years ago, there was a book, Mein Kampf, written by Hitler himself. The technique was all set out in Hitler's book, and it was copied by the aggressors of Italy and Japan. According to that technique, you should never use a small falsehood, always a big one, for its very fantastic nature would make it more credible. If only you keep repeating it over and over and over again.
Yeah, FDR went on to say, this was in an October 23rd, 1940 speech, he said, "I now make the charge that those falsifications," now at this time what he's referring to are a series of lies, he named them in his speech, a series of lies that the Republicans were promoting, that number one, FDR was going to put unemployed people in concentration camps in the states that didn't vote for him. Number two, that Social Security was a Ponzi scheme that he had put up to get popularity, and as soon as he left office, it was going to collapse. And number three, that if FDR was reelected, quote, democracy would end within 4 years, end quote. So then he goes on to say, "I now make the charge that those falsifications are being spread for the purpose of filling the minds and hearts of the American people with fear. They are used to create fear by instilling in the minds of our people doubt of each other, doubt of their government, and doubt of the purposes of their democracy." Now, World War II happened shortly thereafter, and it kind of brought America back together. But here we are, 80 years later, more or less, and you've got Donald Trump, and more than 2/3 of Republicans believe he won the 2020 election. They're believing the big lie. 3/4 of Republicans believe that left-wing protesters were responsible for January 6th and that Trump bears no responsibility. So that's number two. Number three, I think that's number two, whatever. The next one. Trump and the GOP want women back in the kitchen and the bedroom. He bragged about, you can grab women by the crotch and they let you do it when you're a star and all this kind of stuff. He's been credibly accused of rape and sexual assault by over 20 women. He put 3 people on the Supreme Court who became the majority that overturned Roe v. Wade. And now Lindsey Graham and other Republicans want a nationwide abortion ban. They're trying to get this through Congress. And Lindsey Graham has come right out and said his 15-week nationwide abortion ban is just the beginning. Next, Republicans are willing to use gay, lesbian, and trans people as political pawns to generate hate and fear. calling teachers and politicians groomers and arguing that queer people represent an existential threat to America and to our children. This harkens back to an era when violence against and even the murder of LGBTQ people was commonplace in the United States. I mean, Republicans in Congress and the Supreme Court are openly calling for the reversal of the right to marry. They're stirring a cultural movement that makes non-cis people feel unsafe nationwide. And frankly, they're risking people's lives and making a living hell for millions of Americans, all to win elections. Next, another reason why voting for Republicans is voting against America. DeSantis and Abbott are reprising Trump's ginning up of fear of asylum seekers from Central and South America just to win election. It's now come out that DeSantis lied to asylum seekers to get them on the planes to Martha's Vineyard. It appears that there's another plane load of asylum seekers heading to Delaware right now, where President Biden is from. Yesterday, I got an email from Ron DeSantis talking about a poor white woman who was killed by an illegal immigrant, a brown person. These are the tools that fascists and dictators use. Viktor Orban used fear and hatred of Syrian refugees to lever himself into political office, just as Hitler identified the enemy within as being Jews and immigrants to Germany. I mean, the abuse of desperate and fragile human beings in crisis is one of the worst political crimes imaginable. Another reason voting for Republicans is voting against America. Republicans and Trumps are encouraging stochastic terrorism. We've seen a multitude of lone wolf murders and terrorist incidents over the past 6 years, all tied to the Trump cult. He started out telling people at his rallies that if they beat people up, he'd pay their legal bills. And now he's threatening that if he's indicted, there's going to be violence across the country. I mean, this Republican embrace of stochastic terrorism is only matched in precedent by the Klan's activity in the half century after the collapse of Reconstruction. Another reason why voting for Republicans is voting against America. Trump is now openly embracing a religious cult that has led some of its followers to murder. And the GOP is failing to call him out about it. I'm talking about QAnon. And there's even a new book out. It's for sale on Amazon, and it's doing very well, actually. It's a bestseller, and it's promoting the idea that the Bible talks about the Son of God and the Son of Man. Now, Jesus, uses both phrases. The Son of Man phrases all appear, I believe, in the book of Mark, if my recollection is correct. And they're saying that when Jesus was talking about the Son of Man, he was actually not talking about himself. He was talking about Donald Trump. Right. Another reason that voting for Trump or voting for Republicans is voting against America is that they've revived the protocols of the Elders of Zion that Hitler used as his justification for his final solution with this blood libel against Democrats, arguing that Democrats, and by the way, ask any QAnon acolyte, their Jewish allies, are pedophiles who drink the blood of tortured children to get adrenochrome for a high, and they're doubling down on one of the most horrific slanders ever perpetrated in history. Another reason voting for Republicans is voting to destroy America. Trump stole secrets from the U.S. government, may have already given them to Putin as he did the name of an Israeli spy in his first week in office, or he may have sold them. But Republicans don't care. They're still defending and sucking up to him. Patriotism is dead in the GOP. And by the way, was Jared's $2 billion just a down payment? How much was delivered to Trump's secret offshore banking accounts? Another reason, Trump aligned himself with the world's worst dictators and shunned our Democratic allies, and the Republican Party was just fine with that. Another reason, Republicans across the nation are trying to pre-rig election results by purging voting rolls, cutting back on early voting, and passing laws giving their legislatures the ability to overturn election results. Another reason, Republicans deny climate change and block any attempts to stop it, while the fossil fuel industry lavishes them with cash, and Americans die nearly every day from wildfires, floods, and drought. Another reason, Trump encouraged police brutality, while the GOP packed our courts with incompetent but Trump-loyal judges like Judge Luce Cannon. Another reason, the bottom line is, if you're supporting this long and incomplete list of horribles, you are a threat to America. It's just that simple. And I think it's time for us to start saying it. The current Republican Party, led by Donald Trump, and he is the leader of the Republican Party. Ask any elected Republican. Ask the chair of the Republican Party. Donald Trump is anti-American and pro-Putin. It's that simple. How can you defend this? How can you support this? But this is the GOP of today. The Republican Party of my father's time is dead. They're gone. What we have now is a long list of corrupt Republicans ever since Nixon, and the GOP has become an anti-American force.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.